Both driven manual transmissions?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so you may hear in the four-wheel drive circles the argument for or against an automatic. This is really both. Okay, I just don't have to work the clutch.
Sure.
Okay, so really better to have both than having to choose between one, because there are certain situations when one may be better than the other. The next thing we have is a 2-speed transfer case, so high range and low range.
Right.
Understand high range and low range?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And then the next layer of control, because ultimately that's what this is all about. We want to control the vehicle so that we can drive home, not walk home. My number one rule is don't walk home.
Yeah. Good call.
So, in order to control the vehicle for different terrains or different surfaces, despite perhaps not having experience in those terrains or on those surfaces, right? You hadn't been to Moab. Well, there is a, oh, sorry, let's go. There is a rock crawl program for just such an occasion. Okay, so this particular vehicle is equipped with the most advanced, the newest version of terrain response. So it includes dynamic, which will be the program on the left. That's our, we're going to play sports car. We're going to drive around fast and furious. There's an economy mode. Seems pretty self-explanatory. The one that we are in currently is called the comfort program. Had been called general until this year. So in general, you're driving around on pavement, and it's going to do what one would expect it to do so that it behaves like a car. The next program is called grass, gravel, and snow. And so if you'll notice, there is a prompt up at the top that tells you what that is. And look, the pictures are kind of cartoony looking, but Land Rover's a global brand, and so it has to be a multicultural icon that anyone from anywhere can figure out. And so this little snowflake seems pretty straightforward. But if you can't figure out that snowflake, there it tells you grass, gravel, and snow. Right. Okay. And so it prompts us for a feature that we don't really want to worry about at the moment. So we'll bypass that. There is a Mutton Ruts program, there is a sand program, and there is a rock crawl program. And each of these programs will change the behavior of the vehicle to suit what you tell it out the window. Right. There's also a terrain response 2 or an auto function to it. So if I push this down, it lights up over auto, and now the vehicle is going to pick and choose elements of, but not necessarily a wholesale change from one to the next, each of these programs to suit what's going on. And honestly, that works really well for most people most of the time. However, what it doesn't do is allow me to anticipate or predict that behavior. Right. And if I'm in a more specific type of terrain, I might want to choose a more specific program so that I can anticipate.
It doesn't know there's a bunch of rocks right in front of you.
Correct, correct. And although it's going to react far faster than any of us ever could, in reality it is reacting to the issue rather than hopefully preventing the issue because you have predicted that issue, right? Right. So,
and if you were kind of far more knowledgeable than I, more like yourself, is there like a bespoke setting that you could program your preferences?
So only in the sense of the dynamic program, where you could, let's see if we can get this to, oh, sorry, that's not the screen I want there. If we're in the dynamic program, we get, well, it's not on this specific vehicle, but in the dynamic program, there is a another little icon pop up over here, and it looks like a race car helmet, and then you can, to a degree, fine-tune the dynamic program beyond just selecting dynamic.
And is that just purely for on-road dynamics or off-road as well?
That's strictly on-road.
That's strictly on-road.
Okay. Well, I apologize for bringing the feature up since it's not on a specific vehicle, but there is a way to sort of tweak that a little bit.
So presumably it changes the throttle response and the traction control ABS settings.
Well, we're just going to jump into the technical stuff right off the bat. Okay, great. So, yes, but it's more complex than just that. And again, it depends on the specific program that you've chosen. It will also depend somewhat on if you're in high range or in low range. Right. So the behaviors will be different. So let's talk about grass, gravel, and snow. that could easily be a road with 3 inches of snow on top of it.
Sure.
So it's still a real road, it's just there's a new slick surface to it. Okay?
Right.
Or loose gravel but a road bed, or perhaps wet grass but not the swamp.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we're talking about a very high slip, low grip situation. It's pretty easy to imagine either over torquing the available traction or over braking the available traction, in which case the driver has caused the problem.
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
And so the program is designed to minimize the likelihood that the person is going to cause the problem. So, for example, you could be from Florida. You've never seen snow in your life. You have no idea how to drive in the snow, but you can match a snowflake to a snowflake. And if we're in low range, which was what we will be in, it will select third gear to start the transmission out in.
Right.
It's going to reduce the potential torque at 0 miles an hour.
Cool.
And so you reduce
rather than reduce the torque effect, it's hiring the gear, increasing the gear so that it's producing less torque in effect.
At the same speed, yes.
Yeah.
And
cool.
So that is one of the most noticeable things that it does. Clearly, you can feel the difference between starting in first and starting in third.
Yeah.
But it also changes the throttle response.
Yeah.
The throttle's controlled electronically. It changes the preload on the differentials, which we'll get more into in a moment, I suspect. It changes the behavior of this program, dramatically increases the steering response.
Very cool.
So it goes pretty deep. There's a lot to it.
So the day we had Snowmageddon and everybody with rear-wheel drive got stuck, unless they were a good driver and sensible enough to turn off the traction control and spin their way out of danger, to get the wheels rolling on this, but to minimise the danger, it keeps traction control on, and instead of pulling away in first gear, we'll say, oh, I think you need third gear, and then you're not putting so much torque through the wheels, and it gains its traction, but you still got the safety net of traction control itself. So
let's clarify on that a little bit, because you're spot on. But if we're in the Grass Gravel and Snow program and it prompts us to activate low traction launch, which is a cool new feature.
Very good.
But if you read through, so we'll say no for that right now. We'll go to our 4x4 info screen. We will select.
I'm surprised you don't have to read any zillion page disclaimer saying if you die horribly, it's nothing to do with Range Rover's fault. You know,
that's in the owner's manual. So we've chosen a program, but okay, there's no snow. Why do I want this program? Well, you press I, which stands for information, and it brings up not only tells you the highlighted feature, but brings up a sort of a Cliff Notes version of what that's all about. And to your point a moment ago, if we drop it down to here, it says if progress is reduced in deep, soft snow, that turning off dynamic stability control may help, so that the vehicle can still deliver the power, even if you're not pointing in a perfectly straight ahead line, right? So you get a little wiggle, and the car says, hold on a minute here, I'm going to cut the power so that you straighten back up.
Yeah.
But in that particular situation, turning that feature off might help. And again, you're from somewhere where it doesn't snow, you don't know this stuff. Why do you need to know this stuff? You didn't learn this stuff. So here it is. Here's your little prompt to help you know to turn that feature off. You can't really turn traction control off, but dynamic stability control is what you turn off.
Right, okay.
And it's really confusing because the symbols are the same. But
yeah.
So there's a subtle difference to that. So Mutton Ruts. The next program, we're talking good old Georgia clay, right? That heavy, thick, wet cement, suck your boots off kind of mud, right?
Know that.
And so for that particular type of mud, we're still talking slippery, but there's no firm base to it, right? Where in this case, we're talking slippery, but there's a bottom.
Yeah.
This case, slippery, and we don't know where the bottom is. And so that program will start the vehicle off in first gear, but the shift strategy for the transmission is dramatically different. The idea is, in that heavy, super thick, sticky muck, you need a bit of torque to get the tires going.
Yeah.
However, if you continue to deliver that maximum potential torque, you're just going to dig a hole. And so the shift pattern for this program goes from first to second at about 3 miles an hour.
Right.
That first shift is almost instantaneous.
Just gets it rolling, then
you got it. Gears. Second to third is at about 5.5, 6 miles an hour. So it just gets rid of those. You
can see why these cost shitloads of money, can't you? Because it's super smart.
I used to have a 1975 Land Rover. You had one lever to put it into 4-wheel drive, and that was it.
Yeah.
You're aging yourself there.
Well, so here's the thing: you have to be a better driver, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
And so we can call it technique versus technology.
Yeah.
In that vehicle, you have very little technology, and so you need good technique.
Exactly.
In a modern vehicle, people can have less technique and supplement that with better technology and still get there, right?
For sure.
So interesting. This program starts in first. Rock crawl starts in first.
Right.
Mechanically, they're the same gear.
Yeah.
But everything else about them is different. This program attempts to get rid of first gear as quickly as possible.
Right.
This program holds on to first gear for what seems like indefinitely. This program has a very crisp throttle in first gear. This program has an incredibly forgiving throttle in first gear.
Right. And is it dual clutch transmission as well, or not?
I don't believe it's like a Porsche kind of sports car.
Yeah.
I believe it's a standard.
I thought, maybe in theory, in my mind at least, that might help in certain situations off-road where it's already grabbed the next gear in terms of smoothness and transition. But
to be perfectly honest, I don't really know the answer to that question. I don't believe so.
Yay! Asked him a question, he said no.
So what else happens with this program? Well, Mutton Ruts, you've told the car, hey, that's not a road. Maybe I need some help.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that it does is it prompts us to select low range, which we'll do in a moment. It prompts us to raise the vehicle, which we'll do in a moment. And it automatically brings hill descent control up on the screen. Okay? You guys familiar with hill descent control?
I've seen it on Top Gear.
Okay.
I've never used it, but I've seen it on Top Gear.
Well, you just take your feet off the pedals and the car will work it out going downhill totally.
It will work it out, but you have some control over that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
you can steer the car.
more than that. So there's a range. There's this little green bar that pops up behind the 10 right here, and it tells us the operating range for that feature.
Right.
So hill descent control can work if we're in the range somewhere between 2.2 miles an hour and about 16.
And if we were a driving god, could we override that whilst it's still in hill descent mode? Could we like accelerate faster than it, or we have to deactivate it?
Both.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So the simple answer is just turn it off.
Yeah. Okay.
But here's the thing: if you are on the gas pedal, you're telling the car to go. If you're on the brake pedal, you're telling the car to slow.
Right.
If you're coasting, you are not telling the car what to do. And hill descent control kicks in and says, "Hold on a second, there, Richard. You said."
Yeah, you said you want hills.
You said 3 miles an hour, or whatever that you've selected, right?
Yeah.
And so it is going to attempt to make the car go 3 miles an hour or slower.
Cool. I love that graphic because that's telling me what I was asking kind of pre-drive in terms of trying to understand what it's doing with the axles, which ones are locking and not locking.
It does. It's very helpful.
Very smart. Yeah.
Very helpful. So you can select the target speed via the cruise control buttons. So for example, I'm going down a long gravel road that's relatively easy and I have a long line of sight and there's not a lot of potential for slip.
Right.
And I want to coast at a comfortable 6 miles an hour instead of 2. We'll simply raise the target to 6 or above, and then it's not going to it's not going to intercede this moment you take your foot off the gas, right?
Right.
So, yes, driving guide, you can select the behavior of that, or simply turn it completely off.
Cool.
Clearances. Let's talk clearances for just a moment. If you don't mind, we'll come around.
Sure.
I'll come around to your side, so we'll all step out and we'll talk ground clearances.
All right.
So you gonna do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, so unless we are bad drivers, we should approach most obstacles this end first, right? We want to go this direction and not backwards or sideways. So the first clearance is going to be on this end of the car, and we have a name for it. We call it the approach angle, and so that is defined by from where this tire touches the ground to whatever happens to be the lowest up front. In this case, it's just the bumper, but you could have a winch or fog lights or whatever the case may be, right? And so that is the amount of space we have available. We want to sort of file that away in our brain so that when we approach a rock in the woods, if the rock in the woods appears bigger, go around the rock. simple stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we just want names for these clearances.
Just the approach angle.
The approach angle.
Okay.
And angles are defined by degrees, and I'm going to assume you did not bring your protractor with you, so we're
Yeah.
not going to get out and measure every rock.
No.
I don't care what the number is. Right?
Yeah.
The specific number is not important unless I'm going to get out and measure every rock.
Yeah.
What is important is that you have that mental picture of how much space there is, and so then you can judge if you can clear it or if you need to go around it, right?
Sure.
All right, so the next clearance that we want to be aware of is in between the wheels, and that is called the ramp breakover angle. That is defined by those two contact patches and the high point in the center. So imagine you've driven over a sand dune or a snow drift and become beached, right?
Yeah.
We call that high centered. It is easy to do. It is difficult to undo. I have a shovel and I don't want to use it.
Yeah.
We don't want to get high centered if we can help it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the name of this next clearance.
Okay.
Assuming we get the back wheels through the obstacle, then we have typically more tail on the vehicle than we do nose. The departure angle is usually smaller than the approach angle. Just because the front end goes through the ditch unscathed doesn't mean we're not going to drag on the way back out, right? Or if we fail to climb the hill and have to back down it, now that becomes our approach angle, right? So these are the names for the clearances. I don't expect you to remember the names at the end of the day, but just a good idea to have in your mind how much room it looks like you've got, which isn't a whole lot.
No.
So let's fix that.
Is the just out of interest, is the departure angle always steeper than the angle on the front? Because presumably, if you start to go up an obstacle and you don't have the clearance, it's easy to stop and reverse. Whereas if you're going down a steep hill, it's not easy to go backwards.
That I can't say that is the answer for that.
Yeah.
It depends on the styling of the vehicle. It depends on a whole bunch of other factors, right?
Okay.
In general, the back end, the departure angle
Seems to be higher.
is smaller than the approach angle, but that is not always the case, right?
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So
Sounds
we
good.
want more ground clearance, right? We want a better approach angle, and so we push a button, and the front end comes up, and the back end comes up to match it, and so now we have approximately a 3-inch lift.
Yeah.
We have improved all of these angles.
I've got air ride on the Volvo, but it's nowhere near that height, is it?
That extreme.
Yeah.
So
That's
there are
good.
3 user selectable ride heights. Access, which is what it was in when we got in it. Standard, which is about 2 inches taller. That is automatic. Roads have potholes, roads have speed bumps. We need a little more ground clearance. We need a little more wheel travel to accommodate everyday road irregularities.
Yeah.
Well, we just told that our potholes and speed bumps are going to be a lot bigger, and so we raised it up, and like I said, about 3 inches from here. However, there is an extended mode.
Oh. Wow.
If we found ourselves high-centered even at this ride height, the vehicle says,
Wow.
"Don't worry, Richard, I got you," and it's going to raise itself up about another 1.5 inches to hopefully make rule number 1: drive home, don't walk home.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions about the outside?
No. It's
No.
very cool.
Perfect. All right, so we'll get back in. I will drive for just a short stretch to demonstrate a few things,
Sure. Thank
and
you.
then we'll get you going. I'm going to select the Mutton Rut's program and then adhere to its prompts, which suggest that I go to low range. And so in order to do that, you must put the transmission into neutral first, and then to low range. We're already in our off-road ride height, so we don't need to do anything about that. Hill descent control is on and waiting for us to need it, and to drive. As a general rule, we will use drive for level ground or any climbs, and we will use first for all descents. Now, if you, like you said, are familiar with a manual transmission and can think of a good reason to select a specific gear for a climb rather than drive, then I'm okay with that. Matter of fact, I might even prompt you to do that at some point, but we'll deal with that as the situation comes up. A couple things about steering. So, if you've ever spilled your coffee when you hit a pothole, you can understand that the steering wheel moves according to some bump on the ground, and if your thumb happens to be inside the spoke of the wheel and the pothole directs the wheel that way, we have unhappy thumbs. So we want happy thumbs. The next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is perhaps a little trickier. I'm going to ask you to attempt not to cross 12 o'clock on the steering wheel.
Sure. That's easy.
That's easy. All right, you're the first. I've been doing this for 13 years. You're the first person that said, "Oh, that's easy."
When you do your driving test in the UK, it's an instant fail.
If you cross 12.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're constantly shuffling the wheel like this.
Right.
I mean, obviously, once you've passed on the road, you know sometimes you'll go beyond that, but it's very familiar to shuffle the wheel.
Okay,
no
perfect. So I'm glad that you're familiar with that. It does two things for us. A, it means we're never going to put our arm in front of the airbag. We never are at risk of having Range Rover stamped into our forearm. You laugh, I have pictures to prove it.
Oh my God.
And it also means ultimately you have more control.
Yeah.
Right? If we have the luxury of time, we're not in a hurry to get anywhere. And if I make small steering inputs and I make a mistake, I made a small mistake.
Yeah.
If I make big steering inputs and I make a mistake, I could potentially make a big mistake. Okay,
Yeah.
my goal between here and that very large oak tree dead ahead is to dissuade you from relying on instinct.
Okay.
Okay? Sounds easy, but it's harder to do than it is to say. And so this is very simple. We're going to put ourselves on a side tilt, and instinctively, we want to steer away from danger. Our brain says scary that way. Go away from scary.
Yeah. But that's going to make us less stable.
Less stable, right? So if you think, if I had my sunglasses resting on the dash and I turn the wheel harshly to the left, the sunglasses would go that way. So if I steer left, I'm actually directing the car to do the wrong thing. It's hard though. We're built in to want to do this. Feels like what I need to do.
Yeah.
It is incorrect. You will want to do it. I have a friend.
Yeah.
Okay. So between here and the oak tree, the trail is still arrow straight. The ground will suggest that I need to steer into resistance. This right front wheel is going to ride up a hill, the left front wheel will go straight or flat, and it feels like I should steer right. The trail doesn't go right. As the right wheel comes down that hill and the left one goes up, it feels like I should steer left.
Yep.
The trail doesn't go left. The ground is going to give you information. It's going to mislead you. It's going to tell you to do the wrong thing.
So look where you're going. That's the
It sounds
focus.
kindergarten simple, right? Steer the car where the trail goes. Okay. So I'm going to do just what I said. I'm going to.
But don't get target fixation, otherwise we hit the oak tree.
That's actually very possible. Less so at slow speeds, but still very possible. Okay, so I can feel the wheels moving around underneath. If you're watching the screen here, you can see the wheels moving around in real time. So that orange cylinder right there that has reached that little cap at the
wow, so
bottom
I'm showing how compressed it is.
shows you that that particular wheel has reached the limit of its down travel.
Yeah.
And these other wheels are somewhere in between. If it goes to the limit of its up travel, it will flash orange as well. It's showing us full differential lock center and rear, and that changes constantly on the go. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to understand it, although it sounds like you would like to, so I'll be more than happy to explain it.
It's very cool.
And just to relieve us of any distractions. Okay.
There's a fire ant. This is very cool because it's showing when it's locked, when it's unlocked, and seemingly when it's kind of partially locked as well.
We'll come back to partially locked.
Right.
Because I take issue with that phrasing, but
All right. Good.
okay. All right, here we are.
Good. It's good.
Two wheels off the
good
ground.
education.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay, that wheel cannot go lower. That wheel cannot go lower. Those wheels cannot go higher.
Right.
We're maxed out.
Awesome.
It's worst case scenario,
Yeah.
and we're fine. We're calm. We're comfortable, right?
Yeah.
If we're calm and we're comfortable, we can logic our way through the obstacle rather than rely on instinct, which hopefully I just proved is wrong. Okay.
Yep. We're comfortable with that.
Okay. Excellent. You see a little bit of wheel slip. The yellow indicates minor wheel slip. The red is a lot of wheel slip, and on from there. Okay. Now we have bears in Western North Carolina.
Bars.
And there are, just recently, there were 4 sighted on the trails out here. And,
we'll stay in the car then, I think.
yes, we'll stay in the car. So, we're going to ease our way forward so that we can see that the trail in front is clear.
Yes.
Okay, so here we are. We have a descent in front of us. We can imagine that it's slick. And so if let's take a quick inventory of the tools available. What can I do to slow the car down? Well, I can get on the brakes. But the weight of the vehicle is going to be distinctly nose heavy.
Yeah.
So the back brakes will be less effective than the front brakes. And I'm not equipped to change the amount of brake pressure front to rear or left to right. I can do the best practice like you would have done in your 74 or 75, which is to downshift, right? And so by putting it over into the S position, I now have control of the transmission. I am in first, and that's where I want to keep it. So by doing this, it will not upshift,
Right.
which would potentially lose a measure of engine braking. It's also worth pointing out that the gear that you've selected dictates the minimum target speed for hill descent control.
Right.
If we're in first, the minimum is 2.2.
Right.
But if I was in drive and the transmission decided to upshift to second, now my minimum is not 2.2,
Yeah.
and hill descent control cannot be effective at that speed. So I
Right.
want to, for a couple of reasons, lock it into first gear. And here we are, we're safe. Path is clear, no bears, no gas, no brake.
Right.
Now, Richard, if you can't drive at this speed, you don't really need to be driving anyway.
Yeah, I think we'll be safe.
So, here's the thing. We're very nose heavy. Those brakes were less effective than those.
Yeah.
Maybe it's wet over here and dry over there. Those brakes have different grip, or the wheels have different grip. And so it would make sense that I would apply a different amount of brake pressure to each wheel. Otherwise, I'm either over braking or under braking any one wheel.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, hill descent control can control the amount of brake pressure to each wheel independently, and it can then reduce the chance of over braking or under braking any one wheel. So if you notice, I put it back into drive as soon as I started to point the vehicle uphill. Going to reduce the chance of over torquing the available traction, because the vehicle can sense that it might need to shift up to second or third, and if I'm very aware of what's going on, I may decide to choose that myself, but I'll let the car do it as a general practice. All right.
Cool.
Any questions so far?
All good.
All good.
And if we need a spotter, we'll kick Judy out because she can outrun a bear.
Well, these are black bears around here. They're not really interested in any of us.
Yeah.
Unless we happen to have a picnic basket. Okay.
All right.
Ready to go?
Absolutely. Can't wait.